So last week marked the start of the FIFA 2023 Women's World Cup. And a large part of the conversation has been about the fact that the prize pot has been tripled from 30 million to 110 million. And while that is indeed cause for celebration, it is long overdue, as athletes in the women's tournament have been drastically underpaid. So let's take a look at the last World Cup cycle. In 2018, the men's tournament had a prize pot, the money that goes to the players, of $400 million. Meanwhile, the 2019 women's tournament had a prize pot of just $30 million. And this large difference is often justified by being solely down to the fact that the women's tournament doesn't bring in as much revenue. And while I think we'd all love to believe that that's the reason, we all know it's not. FIFA's revenue for 2018, the year of the men's tournament, was $4.6 billion. Meanwhile, FIFA's revenue for 2019, the year of the women's tournament, was $766 million. Meaning the $400 million prize pool of the men's tournament represented about 8.6% of revenue, while the $30 million prize pool of the women's tournament represented just 3.9% of revenue. Even adjusting for revenue, athletes in the women's tournament were paid 45 cents to the dollar of athletes in the men's tournament. But even those revenue numbers are themselves problematic. The majority of FIFA's revenue during the years in which the World Cup is hosted comes from broadcasting rights, which give TV companies the right to broadcast the games and bring in large audiences that they can use to sell advertising. But broadcasters regularly submit drastically undervalued bids to broadcast the women's tournament. While games in the women's tournament draw audiences anywhere from 50 to 80% of the audience that the men's tournament receives, bids from broadcasters are not 20 to 50% less. They're often 100 times less, which FIFA's president Gianni Infantino has complained about. And that's also shown in the numbers. The global audience for the 2018 men's tournament was 3.5 billion people, and broadcast rights for the 2018 Men's World Cup accounted for 95% of the 3.1 billion for the 2015 to 2018 period. That works out to 2.97 billion for the tournament alone. Meanwhile, the 2019 Women's World Cup brought in global audiences of 1.1 billion, about a third of that of the men's tournament. But broadcast rights for the women's tournament brought in just 343 million in revenue, 11% of the men's tournament. What this means is, for the men's tournament, broadcasters valued each football fan in the audience at 83 cents. Meanwhile, for the women's tournament, that same football fan was only valued at 31 cents. If we level the playing field, then for every 1,000 football fans in the audience, athletes in the men's tournament got $71. While for that same audience, athletes in the women's tournament got less than 12, or 16 cents for every dollar the male athletes got. But the pay gap isn't the only problem. Athletes in the women's tournament may not see some or even all of that money. FIFA went back on its promise to the Players' Union that it would directly distribute payments to players, and instead the money would go to individual football federations for them to distribute. An issue that was raised by the Players' Union, as some football federations have no agreement in place with players about monetary compensation, meaning that athletes in the women's tournament may receive only a fraction of the $30,000 that has been promised to each player. So while increasing the prize money is great, it's only dealing with one of the many roadblocks that still exist and prevent athletes in women's football from experiencing equality.